stopping the violence in America. It's been a great journey. Had some wonderful speakers here and giving excellent presentations, allowing us to see that there's many different areas and categories and ways in which violence can be reduced. The major point that we have come up with is that the only way to stop the violence or reduce violence in America, in the world at large, is by looking at the root cause of what causes a person to pick up a gun or pick up an object or whatever to hurt their fellow brother or their fellow sister. Today, one of our speakers could not make it, so we're going to have a recording. And Bishop Frank H. Douglas Jr., and we'll go for it from there. I'll give you an introduction, a more detailed introduction on the video.
Okay.
I wanted to actually, Bishop, we have another speaker. Again, we've had so many wonderful speakers on this stopping the violence in America. And what are the different resolves that should be put in place or have been put in place to begin to curtail and reduce the violence in America? And it's just not one faceted thing that you would use. One shoe does not fit all. We have to look at the variety of cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, environment backgrounds, all of those things that we're learning through the various people that have come on. We have religious leaders and political leaders, or law enforcement, social leaders, advocates. We've had all on, and we are amazed at the different best practices that are out there. And what we believe right now, as we go forward, is that in order to really solve the problem on a national level, eventually we all need to come together and bring our best practices together in one mighty force together. And then I think we will see a national impact. So each person is that indelibly important. And that is our faith leaders, our law enforcement, those who are concerned, men and women who really want to see the sustainable changes that can be. We're looking at violence so in America, it seems like Bishop is getting worse, but yet again, that's how the enemy works. He makes you think that as it gets worse, that there is no change. But you as a faith leader know that throughout the course of history, it always has been that way. But somewhere along the line, when we step up, God steps up. And when we step up, history steps up with us. So we just wanted to really greet you and welcome you. I'm going to ask Nadia to read your bio prior to us, prior to you coming on. But we're grateful to have you. I did read your full story. And why I came on at 3 a.m. is that, but once I read your story, because I was going to have someone substitute to moderate for me, but once I read your story, I said, I got to be there. So that's why I'm here, because I was really impressed and deeply moved by your story. We have your topic, and then after I share that, we have Nadia read your bio, and then thereafter, the floor will be yours. Murder of a son drives KCMO faith leader to start multifaceted nonprofit.
Bishop Frank H. Douglas Jr. is an accomplished preacher and teacher, life performance and cognitive behavioral intervention coach, 29 years as the founding senior pastor of Beth Judah Ministries Church of God in Christ, bjmlovesyou.org. 15 years has served in the episcopacy of the Church of God in Christ. Bishop Douglas is a native Kansas Citian, received his associate degree from Penn Valley Community College and a bachelor's degree from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, completed coursework in Greek studies with the Sheffield Bible College, KC, Missouri, and has received 2 conferred honorary doctorates from Central America Theological Seminary of Kansas City, Missouri, and Southwestern Theological Seminary of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Professionally, 20 years of his career as a logistics supply chain professional with various organizations. Bishop Douglas now provides life performance and cognitive behavioral coaching solutions for individuals, groups, businesses, colleges, and correctional facilities, as well as churches, under his coach consulting business, the Innovative Seed Group, and the Heart of the Father initiative, Equipping for Justice Advantage Love, hficares.org. Serves as Regional Financial Director for the Central Region of the Church of God in Christ, serves as the Financial Director for the Central Region Board of Bishops, serves on the Board of Bishops educational arm as an instructor for ongoing Episcopal and administrative assistant training. Bishop Douglas proudly serves on various national and local organizations, from the Ad Hoc Group Against Crime of Kansas City, Community Program Director, board member of Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Greater Kansas City, Urban Summit of Kansas City, KPRT, Urban Summit. He is a host weekly on 1590 AM and 106.1 FM, Urban Summit cell leader for governmental affairs and elected officials, Concerned Clergy Coalition of Kansas City, Alpha Point Lions Charter Club member, to involvement with communities, creating opportunities. And Bishop Douglas is married to his beautiful wife, Lady Carmen. They have 6 adult children and 7 grandchildren. Please welcome Bishop Frank Douglas Jr.
Wow. I am humbled and honored, and God bless you, Reverend Oliver, for your kindness. I'm normally up at 3 a.m. my time too, but I'm telling you, to be suited and booted and up at 3 a.m., that's quite an honor. And to every brother and sister that I don't know, but hopefully in the days to come, you'll understand. I'm not a ride and die, I'm a ride and live. And I love you to life. Whoever I have not met yet, I look forward to meeting you. Thank you for your hospitality in such an entry point. And I must just give kudos to Reverend Juan Acosta, because it is his persistence. I told him he is like the parable of the neighbor knocking at midnight. And he's been striving to make this connection for the better part of the first of the year. I am again humbled, and I will share my story and parts of my story to the best of my ability. I want to give this caveat. My nonprofit is called Heart of the Father Initiative. And although my son was murdered 4 years ago, and that was the catalyst of it really taking shape, it had actually been 18 plus years prior to that. I had some tapes of Marvin Winans, and he had about 6 cassette tapes called The Heart of the Father. And out of it, for those of us that are followers of Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, he made the parallel that Jesus come to earth to show us how to have subordination to the Father and celebrate it. And so out of that was so intriguing to me. And in the world we live in, there is such a need for fathers. And I had an awesome father, And so I understand today a whole lot that I didn't understand 10 or 15 years ago. That said, so this had been in my spirit. And 48 hours before my son was murdered, I was actually over to his apartment where he and his girlfriend live, and his new 4-week-old daughter. And my custom is the grands do not come over to my house for me to sit until they are out of diapers. So I remember that day going over and talking with him. We talked for about 2.5 hours. That was the last time I was to see him. And we talked about 2.5 hours, and this came up in our conversation, the genesis of what I wanted to do in 2019. Well, I was actually planning for one of our national conferences on the telephone around 2:30, and somewhere between 2:30 on Martin Luther King birthday, January 21, 2019, I got a call, and it was his girlfriend, but she was hysterically screaming in the phone, and I could not make any rhyme or reason. And then I got another call about 5 minutes later from my son Cameron's mother, and she says something has happened to Cameron. And so my wife and I, we were about 10 minutes from away where his apartment was, and then I thought it to call back, and Cameron was no more on the earth. And so we were maybe about 80 feet, 100 feet away from Cameron, and he was under the yellow canopy as the investigators were doing work. And it was then, and for the next 2.5 hours as we were in, I say it had to be the temperature somewhere between 25 and 30. And we were just waiting. And out there waiting, I learned something about his mom. And so my wife and I got there, and there's his mom. She was there, and what we call growing up a day robe. She really wasn't really suited and booted for the weather. And she said something very startling to me. She said, "Frank, we were not here when our son took his last breath on the earth. We're not going anywhere until he's up off that ground." And it said something to me about a mother's love that's slightly different than a father's love. And I was trying to look at, get her protected out of the elements. But I understand and understood where she was coming from. For brothers and sisters, what I have learned in this journey, that the difference between a father and a mother is a mother has 9 months before the world has 9 months of being with the child. The child is within her, and the child develops under that heart of that mother. That being said, my son was killed as a result of him actually literally being in his mother's car and coming down a street, a narrow street in an apartment complex where there was poor security, and the perpetrator pulled his door out on a narrow, and that's what really started this terrible and fatal tragedy. He opened the door, and it was a deliberate action, and it caused my son to go to the car, and they had words, and it's been aired on KCPT here locally, so it's out there on the internet. I feel like people ought to see what anger and hatred can do. And then for about less than 15 seconds, he claimed my son he felt my son was threatening. And he must have said something. My son turned around and he began to shoot at my son. 6 bullets from his Glock landed, and the fatal shot was to the back of my son's head. He was probably 30 feet from my son. And so it suggests to me he shot a handgun before. Nonetheless, we went through much in that time, even though I work even today still with Ad Hoc Group Against Crime here locally, which deals with violence in the city, not just murders, but it deals with just violence as it relates to the urban community here in Kansas City. And I teach in the jails as well as in treatment centers, a program called Thinking for a Change. And so I was really conflicted. This was another chocolate man that had shot another chocolate man. And so there was confliction, but there is also what I have learned in the process is the need for justice. Even as a Christian, I owe it, and I owed it to his daughter. And this was the rationale in which I moved in the 2.5 years. Mind you, this happened about a year before COVID. But this was what I asked God at his scene: do not let my son's murder get less justice than Michael Vick did for his improper behavior with dogs, because I didn't want my son's life to be worth less than a dog. So that was an impetus that drove me through this process. Through the process of that 2.5 years, I have a better understanding of how the court system works. The court system is very collegial to defense attorneys, and it's just the nature of the way here within at least Missouri, the laws are. And I learned that a family has really no rights because it's the state's case. And so that was a very shocking reality about a month later after his murder, when we went to pretrial. It took us, because of COVID, almost 1,000 days to bring his case to trial. That's extremely difficult on a family. So in the process of me forming Heart of the Father, there was a need I already felt because of work I do in the community, where there's gaps in silos in the community of how one agency works or coordinates with another. So I'm so intrigued, Reverend Oliver, because of some of the things you said prior to us going live, to just find out more about this organization. And it sounds so beautiful, the research I've done on this organization. Nonetheless, that's what I felt like, that there's agencies that are not talking to agencies, and the strength of real, true advocacy is missing for the family. And so surviving families go through so much, and I've learned a lot about trauma. I learned that I really have had a traumatic life growing up in the urban core. It has been normed, and that's unfortunate that for many people that trauma has been normed. And then there are different other echelons that not just deal with racism, but classism along the way. And so I had already had the Heart of the Father as something in me, just, knowing that I'd already talked 48 hours earlier to my son. Now, out of that, what was birthed was what I called at that time Project Relentless, because I know that for that 2.5 year period when a family is trying to go from not just healing, but trauma justice. There are a lot of gaps and holes in current processes so that a family really is always in a reactionary mode. And so it started out again as Project Relentless, but as I'm healing now, brothers and sisters, I needed to change and rebrand that, because what I found is that there are 4 basic ways that many of us respond to trauma. Some of us fight, then there's a term flight, then there's the term where we operate in fear, so we just go undercover. And then there's fawn, F-A-N-N. That means we just become a doormat. And so where I found myself was in flight. And so I want you to understand, flight is not exactly what I thought flight was, but flight was if you feel like you're tempted to fight, but you know that is not going to produce the right result because of, at least for me, the Christian Judeo principles which I live by. Mind you, I tell people this, and some people believe me and some didn't. I've never held a handgun. I didn't say that I've never been around one. I said I've never held a handgun. I don't own a handgun. It was not conducive in my upbringing. It does not mean I don't understand why some people are gun holders. And so, but I never held a handgun. It was not promoted when I was married to Cameron's mother. We in the household, we did not let our children play with even toy guns. Even at Cameron, one of his last part-time jobs, he was working at what we call a convenience store where, you know, liquor and things are sold and you get gas. And he had to quit the job because he was uncomfortable having to have a handgun working late at night. That was just one of the requirements of him working late at night. So that was etched in my children's psyche as well as mine from my father for whatever reason. And so I am not anti-gun, but I believe my son would probably still be here if there was gun education, gun training. The lethality of guns from start to finish, whether you're talking about a handgun, in a handgun, the bullets travel about at 850 feet per second. But the lethality there is slightly different than in a military grade gun, which is generally a rifle, that is, which moves about 2,500 feet per second. And then the lethality of the size of that bullet or cartridge makes a lot of difference on skin wound or skin injury and tearing up tissue of a person's body. I believe we're in a reckless moment in our culture because of how we promote guns from every aspect of the television and media, games. I believe all of them play a contributing factor to the level of violence, because many children go and recreate and play paint guns or rifles. And so they get the sense of a power, and they get a sense of a power without responsibility. I believe that when I transitioned, you all, and consequently my son's murderer received 6 years, wouldn't have gotten 6 years had it not been for our vigilance as a family. I understand also, brothers and sisters, restorative justice, but there is a word that is been around for a long time, and it has a lot of misunderstanding, especially in the American culture right now, called reparations. Reparations is a term that comes really out of the 1850s, the early 1800s, when, say, a farmer in an agricultural society, maybe two farmers, a bull tore up the fence, or even maybe an accidental injury that caused trauma or even caused death. Instead of a judicial system getting in the middle of it, those two families would come together and speak of, in the name of peace, how do we bring repair? So really, reparation means about how to bring repair, as the Hebrew word for peace is to make a new covenant, which is shalom, which is to bring back a reparation to a place where nothing's missing, nothing lacking, and nothing broken. And so it's the broken piece that families really deal with. During the time that we were trying to go to trial, and when we were told how difficult it was going to be for us to get the modicum of justice that we were seeking, it broke Terry Cameron's mother's heart. And I do believe 60 days later, she did not necessarily just succumb to COVID, but 60 days earlier, when we were dealing with pre-trial discussion with the judicial system, and they flattened our expectation, I believe it tore her heart apart, and maybe even her will. And so during that time, you're always a fighter. And I want you to understand that gun violence can affect you in so many ways that it can even challenge your character. And I remember being at a place in August of 2020, which is about a year and a half after Cameron's murder. And you contemplate seeing that person, and even maybe what type of retribution you would have toward that person. And I had a relative, and he literally told me at an outing, at an outdoor outing, cousin, I can take care of them for you. And it was the first time I had a reality of maybe how the other person is thinking, that is dealing with the cusp of hatred, going from just evil and wickedness to going over that line. And I was floored for him even making that. He said, now, I'm gonna go to jail, maybe go to prison for life, but you're hurting so badly. I just wanted you to know how much I love you. And I had at least, his mother, Terry, and myself had at least 8 people that come into us in various ways to make that same offer. And for me, it would make me no better than the person that murdered my son. And so it was never an option, but it's just to share with you the tremendous pressures that come for a surviving family that is dealing with this kind of loss. So I'm making it my life's business to, we've converted it from Project Relentless to Equipping for Justice. And I believe that's coming out of me not being pensive and not having the same anger, and have had a time of some level of healing. And so what I realized that when a child is taken from a parent, I don't care if the child is a young adult or an adult, it changes the life of the parents, especially because the natural order is that we go first. It allows that parent also to do a lot of reflection maybe even have guilt about that process. And for me, for several months, I was uncertain if I was on the scene, what could I have done? But what I do know is God is merciful, that in this particular instance, my son's trauma allowed him to be quickly relieved from pain. So he did not suffer from that head injury, aside from his light was snuffed out. So I made the other commitment during the process of that week as we were preparing to funeralize Cameron, that one day, brothers and sisters, I know his daughter, Milani, is going to ask her poppy this one question: did you do everything within your power to get justice for my father's death? I didn't say vengeance, I said justice. I didn't say retribution, I said justice. And I believe I can live, and I asked God at that moment also that would he give me, extend to me some at least 25 more years so I can be able to answer that adult granddaughter one day. Now, Heart of the Father has 4 aspects to it. Dealing with fathers, I believe that we have so many mentors that we have surrogated into the role that the fathers should have, where we need to equip the father. And so I'm about making the father become dedicated to the role. And I have fathers that say to me, brothers and sisters, I can't get along with their mother. I said, you did for 15 minutes. So now let's do your best act to understand that you want to make your number one fans your children. And to do that, if the mother has the custodial guardianship, then she's going to have to become your number one customer. And so when you make her your number one customer, you will reestablish what these 3 R's are, which is relationships require respect. And then secondly is the equipping for justice, in which I believe we're here today. And I believe that every family should get justice. Now, justice may look a little different to every family. I don't believe necessarily the boy that killed my son was 21. My son was 23. And so my son loses a lot. He loses a lot. I don't necessarily believe in retribution where this boy has to suffer, but I do believe that justice should and has occurred. They were going to take his 3 years, give him 3 years and 3 years and run them concurrently. But then we showed some video that he had placed out on social media that he was actually mocking the judicial system. He was actually admitting to what he had done. And because of that, we were able to get them to not run concurrent, but at least 6 years. Now, that's far lower than what we anticipated. But nonetheless, in Kansas City, there are men and women walking around that had perpetrators and murderers that not got 1 day behind bars for that heinous crime. Now, I know some don't see necessarily, forgive. I've forgiven him. I have forgiven him, brothers and sisters. However, justice is an aspect of God's grace as well. Here is Jesus, and this is where I'll stop. And if whatever questions may be offered, Reverend Oliver, here's Jesus between 2 thieves. And Jesus offers grace, and he says, this day you'll be with me in paradise. But what Jesus did not do is alter the consequence that brought the three of them together. Injustice was served, but grace was given also. So I believe there is two truths where justice can be enacted and grace can be enacted. And I believe when we talk about peace today, I believe that's why everyone all over the world is together right in this moment. When we talk about peace, we have to lean on the Apostle Paul, who said, sin does abound, evil or wickedness does abound. And sometimes it seems like there's more wickedness than grace. That's only because we're looking through the lens of hopelessness. But when we look through the lens of hope, then we're able to say, just like the Apostle Paul, wherever sin abounds, grace abounds much more. Brothers and sisters, grace still does abound much more. It is commendable. Everything that everyone is striving to do is on this webinar. God bless you. Thank you for allowing me to share some of my story. I am also a practicing person that takes trauma therapy. Therapuso is the Greek word out of the Bible that stands for layers of healing. If any of you all are dealing with traumatic situations similar to mine that have come as a result of gun violence, do not try to go it alone. God has put beautiful men and women on the planet to help us to get the layered healing that we deserve. Remember, gun violence consequences are abnormal situations, and your body was not designed to hold in the pain or grief that you may be experiencing. God bless you, and thank you, Reverend Oliver, and everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Brilliant. I just want to right now just open up the floor. Anybody have any comments to what the bishop had shared? It was very profound. Floor is open. John Lowen, welcome.
Hey, Zachary, thank you for putting on this absolutely necessary program. So many things to reflect on. First of all, I just wish he was here, but we got to deal with the reality as it is. In the most basic way, justice to me is just is. Dealing with what is, I think as men, we're all competitive. And I have yet to meet someone go into the big game and say, well, I hope it all turns out well. No, we go in because we want to win. And some of the greatest champions of all times, they find a way to demonize the enemy, to feel like they've been perpetrated against in order to win. But I was just this morning, I was looking at a video of Bill Parcells, one of the great NFL coaches of all times, and they were in a practice, and these two guys on the line, they were getting into fights, and he said, all right, run the play again. We can't have these distractions. That would be a penalty. They do it a second time. Then he blows the whistle and he says, all right, you guys take off your helmets. We're going to make a circle. We're going to watch you all. You're going to fight it out right now. And they took off their helmets, and they realized it's different when you take your helmets off. But now you punch somebody with the helmet on. That's different than when you punching someone and you see the blood come out of his nose. I don't think it's the gun violence. It's the avoidance of feeling the impact we have on each other as men. I had an experience with a gun to my head once, a couple times, but the one that is relevant to this discussion is I was in the South Bronx for a complicated set of reasons, and these young drug dealers, they couldn't figure out what I was doing there, and so in that place of They just came to the conclusion that I was a dirty cop who was going to double cross them. So, but when the gun came to my head, it all became clear that we are connected. And I realized this kid who looks very different from me, I come from my wife says, John, you're just a spoiled rich kid from upper middle class suburbia. I don't think of myself that way, but you got to take into consideration how other people see you as well. This kid, our external backgrounds were totally unrelated. But in that moment, I realized he's looking for his father. Why is he a drug dealer? Because it wasn't connected to his father. And my father was, came of age in Nazi Germany, escaped the Holocaust by 5 minutes. And he could, even though my father was there every day, I could never have the conversation I wanted with my father because he was there, but he wasn't there. And I just said to this kid, well, I just explained that you and me are the same person. And he's looking at, and he listens to the thing, and we talked, and then tears started coming down both of our cheeks because we realized, we're looking for our fathers. And it's a terrible feeling to be looking for your father and not know where to find them. It makes you feel violent, right? So we talked, we became friends, and this kid's, I said, but listen, his father was from Colombia. He was a big drug dealer who abandoned the family. I said, you got to go to Colombia and, work this out. And he did. He became a doctor over there. So I just think violence doesn't go away. So the problem is not violence. It's not understanding or being present with our violent feelings, because the world was created through intentional violence. Explosion. The Big Bang was not the blooming. It was a blooming of a flower, but it happened so quickly that it was explosive. And also, you travel to see your grandchildren. You're traveling in a car that has 2,000 violent explosions a minute, but they're not unconscious, reactive, violent explosions. They're intentional. So, the problem is not someone thinks they hate me. It's someone who feels uncomfortable with me, but doesn't know why they feel uncomfortable and acts on it. We don't all have to like each other, but we need to have enough respect to deal with what's going on. What do we feel, and talk about it. And then violence is not an issue.
Thank you, John, for those words. That's true. There's some validity in those words as well. I agree. But one of the things that he did talk about was trauma. And I think a lot of men and women are running around with a lot of unresolved trauma or unrecognized trauma or unappreciated trauma. Held in for a very long time, to the point that the Big Bang came and there was a big explosion, and that explosion became into not a constructive violence, but a destructive violence. And that's when you're causing harm to another person, but ultimately you're causing harm to yourself and your whole community. Thank you very much, John, for those words. Anyone else would like to share? If you like,
before we go on, I wanted to just add to one of the points you made here. Trauma, sure. I think it's not just as individuals, it's collectively. Jewish people have been traumatized. Black people have been traumatized. White people may not know it, but they've been traumatized too. So what happens when you deal with collective trauma? You create you create walls around you. So because everyone feels that we start comparing traumas. You didn't go through what I went through, right? Okay. And there's no cheese down that walkway. So I think we have to recognize, justice is what just is. We have to recognize we're not on a level playing field. We are traumatized. So we need to slow things down to recognize what we're dealing with. So I'm glad you brought that piece up about trauma. And I just would add, it extends beyond the individual.
No, you're absolutely correct. And you're absolutely correct. You're running down a rabbit hole if you're trying to compare my trauma to your trauma. So that's why I used the last word, and that was that we just have to appreciate each other's trauma. That's where we lose. We don't appreciate each other's trauma. Thanks a lot, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Reverend
Mr.
Oliver.
O'Connor. Yes,
sir.
welcome, John.
Well, thank you. Well, I can do it now or at the end. I'd like to share a screen. I have something I want to show you and let others take a look at it too. It's a database of all of our talks we've had with webinars since kind of the beginning.
Maybe at the end, let us
Yeah, sure.
share a few other points of the people like
Good.
to share
Okay.
points on a specific topic. Anyone else like to share? Open up, and it's good to see Randy Burnt online.
Yes, thank you, Reverend Oliver. Yeah, really good, great recording. I really enjoyed his message. He's a great communicator. And not just that, but he had a great lesson for us. And I realized, how much pain there is in such a situation like that, you can't hold it in. You can't just beat this thing on your own. You need help. So he's conveying the importance of getting help from others that God put on the planet who they might not even be religious people, but they have this kind of quality where they know how to feel a person's place where they're at and to bring out the pain, bring out those things which are inside. So he's a wonderful man. And I invited a minister today, but somehow he couldn't make it. But it would have been a great thing for him to hear about with this man to share. So bring him back again sometime. He's really has a lot to share, and it's very, very valuable for all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. And I think, we'd love to have him back so we can have a little bit more dialogue with him. You're correct. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyone else? I know he mentioned Juan Acosta's name.
Juan is at work, so I doubt he's going to be able to. He wanted
anything.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so if no other, I think for me, kept reiterating is the lack of fathers. And that's a problem within our community, within our world at large. Not only our community, it's in all communities. When there's not a father in a home, that's becomes a very imperative and very important missing piece in the lives of both men and women, and especially in the lives of men. We had Reverend Bishop Stevie Burke on last week, and he just deals with men and trauma, and the different types of or images that men should have that disallows them to really express their deepest emotions and the things that are really hurting them because they have to keep a certain image. But he has been working for, what did he say, about 15 years, consistently every Monday, talking with men coming out of the prison system, coming out of broken homes, coming out of, drug-related problems and issues. And he's had some great results. And so I really appreciate that, because family values is inculcated in what he was sharing and what he shared. And I like what he shared from the beginning, just to give us a little background of what the power of family, and his wife standing there in 25-degree weather, probably with a house robe on and slippers, but she refused to move from that spot until that son of hers was lifted off that ground. And that's the heart and the power of a mother. But also there's another power coming from the dads as he was sharing with us. So really grateful for some of the things that he shared. One of the points that I thought that he clarified something to me about reparations. And he says, just not giving something, but it's to repair something. And many times we all are looking for reparations because we're all looking to be repaired or repair something that has caused a trauma and the traumas in our lives. I'm really grateful for re-listening to him, and that's a great takeaway for me as well. Any other person, somebody else have some thoughts? John, you have a smile on your face. I might ask you, why was that smile? Okay, Nadia.
I'm just really grateful to hear this story because I would not know what he went through unless he would, everything that he went through was excruciating. 1,000 days, after losing your son, then 1,000 days. And then what they ended up with, the 6 years. It's just, I wouldn't know anything about this unless I heard him. So I'm really, really grateful for that. Appreciate it.
It's so true. Yeah, it's painful. Violence is something that, as you said, we don't know until we walk in the shoes of that person, what they're really going through, how they're really feeling. I think it's something John said also earlier about, I said, appreciating trauma, but many times we go to, the fight of what I've been through. You don't understand. You can't compare what I've been through, but it's not true. I think everybody has a level of trauma that's important to recognize and important to appreciate. And I think this is where we missed in our society to understand what's the trauma in these neighborhoods. These kids who are more prone to come from a fatherless home, and what they have been through historically has compounded on their particular traumas and the results of it today. But yet, like you said, there's other people out there from different racial and different ethnic backgrounds that basically react the same way once they're, they don't have the component of a certain family component in their lives to help them to become whole or feel the balance that everyone in this world deserves. Anyone else like to share as we come to a close? John O'Connor, maybe we can go over that a little later. Yeah, thank you.
Zachary, were you asking what I was smiling about, or was that someone else that you were referencing before?
No, I was referencing you.
Well, I can tell you what it is. I'm from a Jewish background, and we really believe in justice. If you really have justice, you don't need forgiveness, because justice, like in the spirit of justice, in the origin, we were all together. In the Jewish understanding of life, there was a world that preceded this world called the endless world. And we didn't exist as individuals yet. We were all connected and all in one vessel. And we said we call it the endless world, or the Ein Sof, which is the Hebrew for it. And we described God as light. And the nature of God was to give. So then unless we're going to have a psychotic God and a psychotic creation, if God's nature is to give, then our nature has to be to receive. Otherwise, there's a conflict. Okay, so we all are the same. When it comes down to, Zachary, do you like to receive the desires of your heart? Now, those desires of your heart might be different from mine, but those are the desires that God put in there. So when it comes down to the most basic thing, we're all the same. What makes us interesting is that, you know, I might be fascinated with numbers and you might be fascinated with the beauty of colors, right? So that's why God created more than one person, because we all get an aspect of that. But what we all have in common is having our desires met. So the issue is that the pain comes from when we forget that we are connected. It's not like let's get connected. The starting point is we are connected, but we forget it. So the reason how this came about in the Kabbalistic understanding is that the more God gave to, the more someone gives you, the closer you become to them. So because God is giving us all the desires of our heart. Like if you love chocolate cake, you had every variety of chocolate cake. We're all intoxicated in this thing. But as we get closer to God, we realize, oh my goodness, we're different from God. We want to be like God, but God is giving and we are taking. So we said no to God. No, stop giving. We want to learn to become like you. So God stopped giving. That created the light stopped in a certain place, and that created finite space. And it also created cold and darkness, and everyone's freaking out. Ah! God brought the light back and said, okay, just know, even when you discover who you are and create your own identity, I'm still here. So I'm going to remove the light again, and you guys are going to work on generating the light. But everyone has to focus on that. It's your initiative. Zegri, you can't do it for me. I can't do it for you. There's a place we got to do it for ourselves, in addition to the fact that we're all connected. But we focused on the new thing. So everybody focused on being responsible and taking initiative, and we forgot our connectedness. So when the light came in, it was too much, and the vessel of our connectedness shattered. And that is this world we're in now, those shattered pieces of that vessel. So I think from the Jewish point of view, it's not sin. We just forgot that we were already connected. So we got to discover our unique. You and I are two unique dudes on this planet, Zachary. I think we know that, right? But before we were unique dudes, in the Jewish understanding, we were already connected in another world. It's not about getting connected. It's remembering the origin. So we don't need forgiveness in the Jewish world. We just need to remember where we started.
All right, thank you very much for comment.
That's a podcast right there.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. All right, brothers and sisters, we are at the close of our program. It's 3:02. So sorry, we had another law enforcement officer from Las Vegas. He was supposed to come on, but we just could not. His schedule didn't allow him to come on, and at the last minute I found out. So God bless you all. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, John. Thank you, Randy. Good to see you on as well, and everybody who comes on faithfully. And thank you to the live audience out there. We'll see you next week. God bless you.
God bless.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, Zachary. Beautiful program. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. God bless.
So glad I could make it.